Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Non-profit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. This video was made for entertainment purposes and is transformative in nature. Greetings, Black World TV. Black by popular demand. This video is about the Brazilians, and there's thousands of them who won elections as black candidates in 2020, and guess what? They previously ran for office as white. This article was edited by Andrew Juanez, Assistant Professor of Political Science, the University of Florida. Published January 31st, 2021. Family, this is one of those articles where we're going to learn how certain people of different ethnic backgrounds culturally appropriate, or rather, they culturally steal positions that really should go to black folk, or presumably black, where these people claim that they're black, but they're not really black. What am I getting at? Well, Brazil is undergoing a strange racial reckoning after bombshell revelations that thousands of veteran politicians had changed their self-identified race between the 2016 and 2020 elections. Afro-Brazilians, a category that includes black and mixed race people, comprise 56% of Brazil's population, but 43% of elected officials. So when almost 29,000 Afro-Brazilian city council and mayoral candidates took office on January 1st after winning their races last November, communities of color celebrated their growing political representation. But Brazilian politics may not be as diverse as official statistics suggest. More than 42,000 veteran politicians who ran for office in 2020 had changed their self-declared race since their last campaign, potentially to gain access to new campaign financing earmarked for black candidates. This, my friends, is a huge problem. We've seen this happen over and over again by the Rachel Dolezals, and there's plenty others who pretend or try to pass as black folk. They get jobs, they get loans, they get into historically black colleges, by the way, on grants and things that should go to black folk because these people are lying. I'm going to just say it like that because that's what they're doing. They're flat out lying. But I digress. Of the 28,764 winners who identified as Afro-Brazilian last year, 16%, or 4,580 people, had identified themselves as a different race when they ran for office in 2016. So one minute they're white, in 2016, and then in 2020, they're black. Yep, that's exactly what this is about. Data from Brazil's Superior Electoral Court shows nearly all were previously registered as white, according to my analysis of Brazil's race-switching politicians. The data analyzed does not include first-time candidates whose past racial identification is not documented. Brazilians were outraged when they learned that so many veteran politicians had decided to identify as black. Black voters are left questioning whether the lawmakers actually understand their experience as a marginalized majority and represent their needs in the halls of power. Well, before I continue, let me state for the record, black folk, if you think that these people who once identified themselves as white, and I'm going to say that 9 times out of 10, those were the mulattoes, the mixed race people. You know, the Kiki Wyatts of the world. Yeah, those type of people. Yes, they're going to say that they're white on one hand if it suits their need, it suits their convenience. And then when they need to become black, that's when they'll change, i.e., what the Brazilians are facing now. This is a problem, as I stated before. So, as in the United States, non-white Brazilians, okay? So your black Brazilians, in other words, your Afro-Brazilians, are more likely than whites to be killed by police and to die from COVID-19. Well, that's what they claim, but we're still up in the air on that one, because personally I believe that white folk are dying more of the COVID-19. They always try to make these claims, but then they say, oh, but because it's disproportionately and the statistics say and blah, blah, blah. Shut up. We're going on facts. Okay? But anyways, they also lag behind whites on virtually every objective indicator of well-being, from education level to income. Afro-Brazilian activists have demanded that elected officials address these long-standing racial inequalities with limited success. The country has a few federal affirmative action and racial justice programs. You know, black folk, no matter where we are on our planet, Earth, you know, this planet that our common Father, God Himself, blessed black folk with first, it's funny, no, it's sad and pathetic that people who have come way after have chosen to treat the first people on the planet in this way. And what's worse is we have accepted it. Hook, line, and sinker. We've totally accepted this type of behavior. That's what's sad and pathetic also. But I digress. But the country's president, Jair Bolsonaro, has pledged to eliminate even those efforts at equality. His administration claims that Brazil is a racial democracy, a society free of racism and discrimination. In other words, family, they're in complete denial, you know, because these are non-white. So, of course, they can't see our truth. Or, no, they pretend. Let me make that clear. They pretend not to see the facts. They pretend like they don't know. This is to make sure that they keep getting all the benefits that you and I do not get. But I digress. In my research on Afro-Brazilian political representation, I found a pervasive belief that life would improve for communities of color if more Afro-Brazilians held political power. Let's put the brakes on that one. Just because you put a black face in power, if they don't have a black mind, a black ideology, if they don't love themselves and know who they are, you can hang it up thinking that just because you put a black face in that power seat, that something's going to happen to you, i.e. Kamala Harris. You think I'm going to do anything for black folks only? No! You remember that. But I digress. I interviewed Brazilian activists, politicians, and voters in 2016 and 2018. Many claim that Afro-Brazilian lawmakers advocate for non-whites and prioritize their needs. They pointed to the actions of politicians like Rio de Janeiro City Council member Marielle Franco, an outspoken critic of police violence, who was assassinated in March 2018. Now you see, family, I'm not familiar with that story, but as I just read, that person who was an outspoken critic of police violence, They were assassinated. Because this is what evil, vile, cruel, filthy, disgusting people do. This is when they want to keep and uphold a system that's so disgusting. This is what they do. They try to kill you off. They try to silence you. They try to stop you from exposing their shit. But I digress. There is some evidence to back up this belief. My research indicates that Afro-Brazilian legislators do behave differently from their white colleagues. In Congress, they are more likely to introduce legislation that celebrates blackness, such as establishing a National Day of Black Consciousness, and to author bills that address racial disparities and racial discrimination. Now, what I just read to you is different than the black folk we have right here in America, because we have what's called the Black Caucus, don't we? Or I think that's the name of it. Well, the reason why I don't know is because they don't do shit. So why would I? Congressional Black Caucus, excuse me, the CBC. Yeah, they don't do shit. They just stand up there, and as a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, they stood up for other things that didn't have to do with black folk. That's what black folk do in positions here in America. But I digress. Quote, I know the position of blacks in this country, unquote, said Benedita da Silva, Brazil's first black female member of Congress, in a 1987 interview with the New York Times following her electoral victory. Quote, I have a special responsibility to speak out on the subjects that I know about against racial discrimination, unquote. The 4,580 new Afro-Brazilian lawmakers who assumed office on January 1st after years or a lifetime of passing as white may not have that understanding of blackness or feel the same responsibility toward Afro-Brazilian communities. Ironically, a racial equality initiative likely contributed to Brazil's political race-changing scandal. In a major victory for the country's black consciousness movement, Brazil's top electoral court ruled in September 2020 that each political party had to split the campaign resources it receives from the government proportionately between its white and non-white candidates. Wow. Now see, that's a step in the right direction, where you are splitting the resources evenly. But I digress. Many race-switching politicians are presumed to have adopted non-white identities opportunistically to attain those campaign resources. In other words, these people are lying so they can get their hands on the money. You know, this is how disgusting, vile racists actually act. This is how they do, because they do it right here in my own country, the United Snakes of America. But I digress. Some politicians who now identify as Afro-Brazilian reject the notion, claiming they are just finally acknowledging their blackness. Ain't that a bit? Anyways, in a country where blackness was historically stigmatized, Brazilians have been known to identify as members of lighter racial categories when possible. In other words, you guys didn't have a backbone. You suffer from self-hatred. You have no confidence and you suffer from low self-esteem, to where you had to identify as some lighter category just to make yourself feel better, to be accepted, you know. Anyways, for example, Moema Gramacho, the mayor of the northwestern town of Lauro de Freitas, claimed she wanted to recover her identity, by changing her race from mixed race in 2016 to black in 2020. Quote, it was a matter of self-affirmation, she told Folha de Sao Paulo newspaper. Census data does show that more Brazilians are moving across the racial continuum from white to black, a trend attributed to growing levels of education and racial consciousness in recent decades. But the timing of all these politicians racially reinventing themselves is suspicious to many black Brazilians. Well, you think? Do you have your thinking cap on, black people, Afro-Brazilians? You think? Quote, until yesterday, nobody wanted to be black. Unquote, Livia Zaruti, a black social media personality, said in a widely viewed YouTube video referencing Gramacho. Quote, now that there is a financial benefit, people think, I will recover my roots. Unquote. Yes, like I said, they're doing it only for a financial gain. But anyways, on paper, Brazil has more self-identified Afro-Brazilians in public office today than ever before. In practice, this majority black nation wonders whether it has actually taken a step toward racial equality. Well, you should keep wondering, because it does sound very, very suspicious. And if I was Afro-Brazilian, I'd be side-eyeing, looking up and down at those politicians. I wouldn't trust not one of them. And I don't. And I'm not even Brazilian. But if I was you, an Afro-Brazilian, I wouldn't trust them at all. This is the end of the story. This is Black World TV, the new black media, black by popular demand.